welcome everyone listening in and on the recordings afterwards. I'm Antti, I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Robocorp. And today I'm going to be talking about how we are leveraging Python and Robo framework ecosystems for business process automation and at the same time disrupting the industry around RPA. And so to kick off the agenda, I'm first going to talk about what is RPA. I think not everyone here is going to be familiar with the concept of RPA. Then I'm going to be talking about some common misconceptions around RPA, making the case for open source in RPA, overviewing Robocorp, what we are doing there, and talking about what it's like to disrupt the existing industry with open source. So what is RPA? RPA stands for robotic process automation, and it's basically automating existing business processes or tasks with agents that are essentially code. So the basic idea in RPA is that instead of rebuilding everything to solve a particular business problem or automation problem, you can actually use non-intrusive agents to go in and build automations. And so it's kind of like macros, but really on steroids with proper governance and control features built in. You can go in through user interfaces, so just like UI-based automation, like in QA test automation you would do, or then you can go through deeper integrations like API-based integrations or locators or things like that. But the typical thing that people mean when they talk about RPA is really a script, a bot that goes in and performs a task that human users might otherwise do. And to kind of put it in concrete terms, I'm going to show a real-world use case, which is around data validation in audit. And this automation is going to deal with automating Salesforce and SAP and Excel and a bunch of other stuff. So we're going to just look at the first few steps. And going through the automation here, first we're going to look at the manual process. So in RPA, there's typically always the manual process as is process that is going to be automated by the bots. So in this instance, what we need to do is go into Salesforce, grab a bunch of data, and then start going through Salesforce screens manually and grabbing screenshots out of those screens. This might seem a bit silly to software professionals, but this is oftentimes the world that we don't see day to day, where people are doing manual routine labor on IT systems just because they need to fill in a particular requirement. In this case, it's the SOX compliance for publicly traded companies. And here we're going to see a bot doing the same piece of work. So the bot is going to log into Salesforce through the browser. This is because the actual manual process required the browser view to be screenshotted. So obviously we have APIs to Salesforce, but in this instance the requirement was around using the actual UI. So the bot is going through the browser and capturing a bunch of screenshots here. And now it's doing it for roughly 2,000 entries, but think about this in real life, it would go through hundreds and hundreds of entries. And now the bot opens up SAP and starts interacting with the SAP GUI. Now SAP is a particular application that doesn't actually support API-based interaction, so really the only way to automate SAP is going to be going through the GUI. Now the bot completed that task in 3 minutes. And manually with human screenshotting stuff and going through SAP would even with a fast operator would take more than 15 minutes. Now that was again for 2,000 entries. So think about hundreds. And this is somebody's day in, day out job. So it's pretty soul crushing to actually do that work. So there's a practical need to solve these kind of manual routines around IT systems pretty much everywhere. And talking with some of the larger, more well-established RPA vendors, one time I actually asked them, how many use cases have you recorded so far? And they told me that they stopped counting after 10,000 use cases. So you can split it by by functions like finance, HR, sales, marketing, operations, and so forth, or you can look at industry verticals like healthcare or financial services and so forth. There's use cases for this kind of automation everywhere. And kind of important is to understand that RPA is complementary to other forms of automations like API to API automation, like Zapier, for instance. RPA typically is the last mile of that automation, where you need to perform something in a specific internal network in a company or specific application that doesn't allow for any other type of interaction. So it really complements a lot of other automation initiatives that might be on the way at the same time. It's not sort of a silver bullet for everything, but where it's applicable is really, really useful. And so it's no wonder that the market around RPA has grown pretty significantly over the past few years. Gartner said it was one time the fastest growing segment in enterprise software. And today, this year, RPA is estimated to be around $2 billion industry, and is expected to grow pretty linearly over the years. And for every sold dollar worth of RPA software sold, you typically see $2 to $3 of services. So it's $1 services, which is the 2 billion share here, and then 3 times that potentially services. So we're talking about pretty significant industry already, and there are a lot of players in the field. This is the magic quadrant that lists some of the largest players out there, UiPath being a notable one, Microsoft really gaining way. There's Blue Prism Automation Anywhere, and various other systems or vendors that offer similar solutions out there. So let's see. So what are then the common myths in RPA? When you hear somebody talking about RPA, you typically bump into these kind of claims. So the first claim might be that RPA is a band-aid. People say that, okay, I had this reaction when I first went into RPA. It's like, why can't you fix the underlying system instead of automating it? Like, okay, why don't you fix SAP instead of like building a bot on top of it? That's the engineering response, and oftentimes it's just that there's no business case to fix the underlying systems, or it might be so difficult, or the use case might be so niche in the big picture that somebody spends literally all their time, or like group of people spending all their time doing something manually across systems that might be still more cheaper than to try to come up with a API level integration or database level integration to fix that issue. So there's always going to be parts of processes that fall through the cracks, and you cannot just fix the underlying system in a reasonable amount of effort. And so I've come to see now that the RPA is something that's going to be adopted by much every enterprise out there, and we're also seeing that it's going down market into small and medium-sized companies as well, through service providers that provide RPA as a service. So RPA is here to stay. It's not a band-aid technology by any means. And then the second myth that I want to talk about is citizen developers. So you'll oftentimes hear cited that with RPA, it should be something that's for citizen developers, where you have non-developers going around IT and fixing the process by themselves in a way where the IT isn't really interested in helping them out. And here's Gartner's definition of citizen developer is somebody using tools that are not actively forbidden by IT to fix something. So that's pretty funny definition. But in reality, while low code is a huge trend, and I'm all for low code, building and maintaining automations is actually something, even though would be done by low code tools, is something that actually requires professional RPA developers. Oftentimes these automations are so complex that they really require a developer mindset to pull off. Otherwise they end up being pretty trivial and providing very little value. And then the third myth I'm talking about here is that oftentimes you hear that RPA, isn't it like AI that you have about learning what people do and then replicating it? It's not the case, at least in most parts. There is typically AI components to RPA, which might revolve around document capture, or OCR, or similar technologies, or chatbots. But while every vendor would love to claim that they have a magical AI solution, is all quite a lot the same. A lot of these technologies that are out there leading the industry, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, these are all something that was started in the early 2000s, 2003, 2005, and so forth. So it's C#, Visual Basic, Java, .NET. These are the typical stacks that these tools have been built on, and they are nowadays billion-dollar companies. So here's a few examples of actually what the RPA tools out there leading the industry look like. This is UiPath. It's built on top of workflow foundation in .NET. Actually, it's, if you open up the standard workflow foundation, it looks pretty much the same. Here's another Monday. This is a company that got acquired quite recently. It's the same basic idea around the workflow foundation. Then we can have, can't remember which company this was, but you see is running a VB script here. Typical on the left plane, we have actions like log off user, run application, etc., loops, flow control, mouse and keyboard inputs, and so forth. Here's yet another tool. Pretty much this is, I think, IBM's solution. Excel interaction, running macros in Excel and so forth. Pretty standard stuff on all of these. So now that we've covered the basics around RPA, let's move into open source RPA. And so thinking about RPA as a technology itself, it's pretty horizontal. You have to cover a lot of ground to build a RPA suite. And so what you basically need is integrations to hundreds of, not even thousands of different applications and operating system functionalities. And there are always two components to RPA. There's the developer tools, the tools that you use to build RPA, and then there's going to be the orchestration platform, the platform that you use to operate the RPA. And you'll need both. So the orchestration platform is typically the one that gets a lot of attention, because that's how you deploy those scripts, those routines in the enterprise. And here on the right hand side, I have a list of a small section of a list of RPA libraries that are typically used. So you see database, desktop access, Excel, etc., Java integrations, and so forth. And I tried to count it. I didn't get to everyone, but there's at least 100 or more RPA vendors out there. So it kind of makes you wonder, why do we need 100 technology vendors in this space to address this problem area? If this is fairly, everyone is doing more or less the same thing with a little bit of a twist on top of that. So wouldn't it be great if it have an open source foundation to actually power all this? Really solving the fragmentation issue in RPA. We don't need actually 100 vendors to provide a solution for this. When we have common foundations, we can have innovation on top of that foundation. You could say that platforms like UiPath, for sure there's innovation on top of those, the ones who get big enough, but there's really not a genuine open ecosystem building around proprietary technologies that are heavily enterprise focused like that. So open source can address the fragmentation issue, the lack of innovation, and then one other theme is skyrocketing license cost with RPA. So just getting a RPA program off the ground will typically set you back 100,000 annual in licensing before you actually even get to do anything. And then you're gonna have the limited pool of people who actually know how to work with these proprietary technologies. So open source can really solve a lot of these issues in this space that's fast growing. And so I'm not optimistic enough to think that we're going to be able to build one open source solution that's going to solve everything in the form of standardization in RPA. There's this favorite XKCD comic around it, but at least we can address some of the other problems in RPA, like the cost factor, for instance. On the right hand side here, I have a subsection of a licensing scheme for UiPath, and it's very complex. They have dozens and dozens of SKUs, all different licensing components, and you'll need a licensing expert to navigate this just before you can even build anything. And you get locked into these multi-year deals, and all of these licenses are basically tied to the execution unit of the automation. So you buy a license to run a bot. When your license expires, you cannot run that automation anymore. It's tied to the license, so you always need to have a valid license to run the automation that you had built on with the tools. And so there's licenses for dev tools, runtime environments, orchestration, add-ons, premium connectors, and so forth. So when we started out Robocorp, we wanted to solve some of these problems that have been mentioned here with open source. And we really started with first principles thinking, thinking about things like, who is the persona actually building and maintaining RPA solutions? Is it really the citizen developer, or do we want to target somebody else? What is going to be the best way to deliver bots to users? And what's going to be the right value metric for RPA? Now, since this is all things open, some of these problems that we are solving are not specific to open source. But then again, there's a lot of open source that we are bringing into this space, so they can overlap with each other. So starting off with who builds and maintains RPA solution, we see this citizen developer being mentioned across the industry, but when you actually go down to the grassroots and start talking with people who build RPA solutions, actually you see that there's 99% of the cases are done with professional RPA or automation developers. So while citizen developer story is really great for selling the solution, the vendor solution, actually not great for operating or building or actually running these automations. So we thought out, okay, let's build a solution that actual RPA developers will enjoy to use. And when talking about developers, we know that developers want to have best-in-class tooling, great support by the community, extensive documentation, getting started immediately without talking to a sales guy, and then extensible frameworks. So that's good. Then we thought about delivering the bots. How do we actually operate them? And today, curious enough, most RPA solutions are on premise. But when we started out in 2019 at Robocorp, we thought that, okay, who on earth would deploy an on-premise solution in 2020? And so we targeted to deploy these bots through cloud. Now with RPA, you oftentimes do need to run the bot itself on premise or in a private cloud or in a closed down environment. So while the control plane might be in the cloud, the bot actually needs to be able to run it everywhere. So and then last, we thought about the value metric. Oftentimes we get asked that, okay, your guys' solution is open source, so how do you make any money? That's kind of the easiest part about open source, I think. Right now, we have so many good working models. Obviously, there's the support model, but I don't personally really like that. I think open core has proven itself really, really valuable in the space. So, okay, providing the open source core, but then a proprietary cluster of services and solutions on top of that. That was really the way that we wanted to go about and really answer questions around governance, security, compliance for RPA with open source. And then when we were starting out Robocorp, we thought that the licensing scheme itself tied to bot execution units was pretty lame. And so we wanted to change that as well, and went with a consumption-based pricing model, similar to like something like Snowflake would have, where the value metric is the actual working time of the bot instead of a work runtime environment, for instance. So we took that as a foundation and launched Robocorp really with the three key targets here. So we wanted to create an open source stack and tools built for automation professionals, a cloud native orchestration platform for operating bots, and then have it all in a consumption-based pricing model. So to start building this, we had some help with existing open source communities. We started out with something that's called Robo Framework. Now this is an open source project that has been around since 2008, I think, and I've been personally heavily involved in the community and helping it grow over the years. Now, Robo Framework is a generic automation framework built on Python and is extendable through libraries. It originated at Nokia and was open source from there, and currently has hundreds of thousands of users globally. And GitHub stars, if they matter at all, is over 6,000. And I just checked yesterday, the monthly download count was around 850,000. So pretty actively used project. And what's best with it is that it's actively supported by corporate sponsors. We have a non-profit foundation over it that governs the project, and that foundation has over 50 member companies sponsoring it. So it has robust foundation to start, an open source RPA company on top of. And what's really good with Robo Framework is that it provides this extendable library interface, which allows you to build high-level libraries on top of it. Robo Framework itself doesn't come with much, but you always extend it through libraries. Like in this instance, on the right, we have Selenium library that we have, and it has keywords like open browser, and so forth, input text, click button. And that allows you to build on a Python foundation, but also have something that's high level and really understandable by people with limited scripting capabilities. And if you are a pro developer, you can extend this freely with Python code, so you're not locked into any sort of weaker language. Robo Framework also provides great logging facilities, so it produces a rich log from every run that the bot does. So we picked this as the baseline for our RPA solution. And funny things to notice is that Robo Framework has this syntax that's called the tabular syntax. So it separates elements, attributes, and functions and keywords with 2 or more spaces. So that's why you see the keywords here or functions being sort of long open logging page. Logging page should be open and so forth, which are kind of human readable. So it really lends itself well to RPA, where we are kind of targeting maybe not your typical backend engineer with the solution, but more of a business analyst developer. And so starting with this foundation, we had a number of technical challenges to solve. And this is where it gets a bit more nerdy, this talk. We started out with business, but we are going deeper into the technical territory here. So there's a great book, The Innovation Stack, by the Square founder, Jim McKelvey, and that book's I recommend it to anyone interested. That book really talks about startups, and you have certain problems where you can copy. So just do what everyone else is doing, and you're going to be good. But then you have small set of problems where you absolutely must innovate, and those are going to be the innovation stack that the company builds. And I found that idea pretty interesting. And so if you start thinking about our innovation stack, what we have to have solved in order to have a solution to sell, we first needed to figure out how do we run these bots that I've written with Robo Framework on the host OS, that in an environment that we actually don't control or we don't know anything about. And so somebody might say, hey, just run it in containers. That's how you do it. That's good and fine. And unless you realize that those parts actually need to interact with a lot of the applications that are hosted on that host OS. So you would need to break out the container, and that's oftentimes difficult. So in order to automate a legacy Windows 32-bit app on a well, or let's say bank mainframe terminal for that matter, you really typically need to run a lot of Windows-based apps and so forth that don't really lend themselves well to containerization. So we need to figure out how to deploy Python code across thousands of environments effectively and securely, environments that we don't control. Then we needed to figure out orchestration of those parts across pretty much any imaginable runtime environment, through a scalable cloud platform that's highly secure and available. And then we needed to figure out all the automation frameworks, how we put those together. But we had the Robo framework ecosystem to help with that already. So Python execution environment isolation and caching is really a topic that we know a bit too much about at Robocorp already. So we wanted to know, how do we actually maintain a pristine Python environment for each bot that's going to run on a target system somewhere outside of our control, while keeping it fast and storage efficient. And this is something that hasn't been solved before. We tried to look for many solutions, but couldn't find one that would fit our needs. So we didn't come up with this one on the first try, but after a few iterations, we ended up something that we call Holotree, which is funny enough landed from Star Trek's holodeck concept. So I'm going to explain that concept in a bit, but how we manage Python environments is pretty interesting in itself. So we store always each unique file only once on each runtime machine, and then whenever we need to put together a runtime environment, we shift around those files in a way where you always end up with a pristine runtime environment with minimal possible file operations and no duplication of files. So we end up with something that can put together a Python execution environment with hundreds and hundreds of dependencies. These are like long lists of dependencies when we're talking about RPA solutions, while also, it takes seconds to put that together while preserving disk space and then running natively on the host OS without containerization or anything like that. And on the right here on the bottom, I have a graph showing how much disk space we are using across 180 different runtime environment variants on the cloud environments that we operate ourselves for our customers. So you can see these jumps in the storage usage as we add new environments, but the Holotree system makes sure that only new files are stored. We don't store duplicates of anyone. So we get 180 plus 190 environments in 3.5 gigs, which is pretty amazing, I think. So the basic idea why it's inspired by Holodeck is that, we only change things, or we only put in place things that have changed once. So this is a long explanation of how the system works. It's on GitHub. You can check it out. It has tons of commands and is usable beyond RPA. If you're interested in Python environment management, I think you should check it out. But kind of the basic idea is that this hotel analogy here, if we have the environment, which is in this case, kind of self-sufficient, we'd always have to replace the whole operating system, everything. This would be basically a virtual machine image on the left. Then in the middle is a container solution where you always replace a container when something has been touched, when you need to replace it with the original one. And then the last example is really the holodeck, where you just say reload and it reloads a missing fridge or missing chair or missing bench in the holodeck environment. So that's the analogy. So that was a significant innovation that we had to come up with in order to create a viable automation stack based on open source. So we have the RCC toolchain on top for packaging, running, and managing bots. We have a definition format for configuring bots. Then we have Robo framework and automation libraries that we built and the community builds. And then that all sits on top of Python, and we support various kinds of development environments and extensions around VS Code, PyCharm, JupyterLab, and so forth for people who build bots. And this is all open source, so it's free to use. Just go to our GitHub or our download page and just start using it. You don't have to call us or do anything. You can just start using it. And we actually have major corporations and enterprises using the open source stack to build their own RPA solution. But since we want to provide an end-to-end solution and also hopefully make some money with that, we also provide the orchestration platform that's hosted as SaaS, or we offer it as private cloud for enterprise as well. So the way it works is that the free and open source things are all on the left. On the developer tool side, you can build a fully functioning bot and run it, no problem. And then when you want to operationalize, fix all of those issues around governance, compliance, and security, you can use the control room to do that and run those bots either as assistants or unattended bots. And so diving a bit deeper into the control room itself, we have various things here. This is a view of the robot workforce page on the control room. So on the top, you see things like log is for audit trace, API is for creating API tokens for external systems to integrate with the bots that are running through control room. Then we have Vault for storing secrets, credentials, tokens, and so forth for the bots. The bots typically use things like service accounts for accessing various internal systems. So you can use the Vault here to store them. It's going to be encrypted through AWS KMS. And then under environments, we control the runtime environments. We have an agent that we install on the runtime environment, or the customer installs and links to the control room, which then can securely run the bots. Under robots, we bring in robot code. We can support GitHub or then various other CI/CD type of workflows or manual uploads. And then we have assistants and workforce being the unattended side. And when you have a bot here, you can configure it various ways and monitor its operations, get notifications, trigger it with email, schedule it, and so forth. We're not going to go deeper into this, but it's a pretty extensive system that we've been building here over the last 2 years or so. And security being one of the highlight features actually here. RPA is typically considered as pretty security critical space when you think about bots actually accessing your internal systems to perform actions like human workers would. It brings a lot of security and compliance questions. So we have security is pretty much something that we don't really take any shortcuts in. So we've taken it very seriously from the beginning and architected the whole system from bottom up to be extremely secure. And we've recently achieved SOC 2 Type 2 and HIPAA compliance. So a lot of security innovation as well going into this. So part of our innovation stack, if you want. And kind of putting it all together here in this picture, we have the development flow on the bottom, operating and management flow on the top, including third-party integrations and runtime environments and so forth. It's pretty big set of things that we have to build. And now thinking about all those hundreds of vendors building pretty much similar functionality again and again, I think there's really demand for technologies that are not purely vendor locked in the space, and then kind of wrapping it up with the pricing model that I already mentioned. So being consumption based, we are able to save a ton in unused licenses, where you typically have bot execution licenses that they are on average 30% utilized, and then infrastructure costs with the cloud and all of that. So it amounts to significant savings, and obviously the fact that you can start building without licensing anything is a huge benefit. But kind of putting it together, all in all, we build a programmable RPA solution for developers, completely based on open source technologies, freely available under Apache 2 license, that can be then deployed through a cloud platform, which is proprietary to us, to operate seamlessly in an enterprise or smaller company setting, and really eliminating a lot of waste and increasing efficiency there in RPA operations. And summarizing the company side, we've been running the company since 2019. Right now we've raised 32 million in VC funding, went through Series A quite recently, and we've been able to build a network of implementation and solution partners, over 75 of them globally. I really like this fact that there has been at least 7 new companies founded on top of Robocorp, which I know of. So these are people who found our technology, really taking liking to it, and said that, hey, I need to start a new company. I can really pursue this opportunity to start automating business processes. And we are about to close first enterprise grade deals soon. But also the last point, companies like Amex are using the open source stack as it is. So without even utilizing our cloud platform, which is pretty amazing that in such a short time we've been able to create something which is used by massive corporations to build their own internal RPA systems out. Here's a map of the partners showing how global the reach is. Again, not being sales driven, all in all, we have a global footprint of people building on top of the open source stack. But so that kind of brings me to the last point in my talk, which is disrupting an industry. And I mentioned in the beginning that we are looking to disrupt the RPA industry with Python-based or open source tooling, and something as big of a multi-billion-dollar industry, it really doesn't like being disrupted, and obviously there's a lot of competition out there. So just picked up a few headlines from recent memory that I have from the competition out there. Things like Microsoft entering this space very heavily in the past year or two. They like playing Monopoly, obviously, and just gave out their Power Automate platform for free to all Windows 10 users. And well, giving it out for free is a bit of an overstatement. It actually costs money to run and operate it, but this is the headline that they can drive, being Microsoft. So competing against Microsoft as a small startup with open source, pretty daunting. Then we have UiPath, actually a great company. I really respect them quite a bit. They basically build out RPA to what it is today. Recently went public, and I think they're trading at $35 billion or something similar to that. And then companies like Salesforce stepping into RPA by acquisitions, and there has been actually a ton of acquisitions in the RPA space quite in the recent 2 years. Everything from IBM, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and so forth. Microsoft acquired one. So we see this trend of large platforms acquiring these first generation RPA companies and incorporating it into their offering. So this all kind of shows the demand around RPA, really the customer side pool for RPA, which is driving a lot of this. But then as an open source play in this space, how do you stay relevant with all this competition blasting hundreds of millions of marketing dollars into the audience? It's a challenge, of course. And talking about challenges with open source, there must be a lot of open source practitioners either listening today, or then listening to a recording of this, this is what we hear from potential customers oftentimes with open source. Well, is it secure? Open source cannot be secure. It's of course free, but is it as powerful as some of the proprietary solutions? Or then, open source is hard to use. So a lot of misconceptions around open source for sure. First of all, none of our competitors are built without open source. That's a fact. But security, we as a startup company obviously can address that with certifications like SOC 2 and HIPAA and ISO. And the hard to use argument it's valid oftentimes when you talk about open source projects. We took something which was existing, Robo Framework, and when we took it, it was basically like a bunch of IKEA instructions and a sheet of metal, but the customer expects to have a ready to fly plane. So we want to have something that's easy to get started with and easy to use when we offer it to our customers, even though that's open source. And a lot of the value add in open source companies like us are going to be around security, governance, compliance, ease of getting started using and operating. It's kind of 101 open source, I think. And then, talking about more of the disrupting angle, better is always going to be different. So whether it's cloud-based, different pricing, competing against low code, we hear things like, we can't use the cloud. I want to run in my data center. The pricing is so different that we don't know how to compare it, or thinking around low code. Well, isn't scripting going to be always slower than low code, which is typically not. But I guess you're not doing something different if you're not getting this pushback. So that should be expected, I think. But that was my presentation around how we are leveraging Robo Framework and Python to change the RPA industry and to make it usable in business process automation. I'm gonna stop my share and see if there's gonna be any Q&A from the audience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that presentation. Definitely enjoyed your presentation. If you have any questions for our presenter, you can go ahead and use the Q&A feature, or you can go ahead and use the chat as well, so we can go get those questions answered for you. Let me give them a few minutes so we can get some questions.
There's anyone on the chat, I'd like to hear if anyone knew before this talk what is RPA. I think it's going more mainstream nowadays with all the news, but then again, I might be in a bubble dealing with this stuff day in, day out. So I'm curious to hear if anyone has heard about RPA, or was this the first touching point with the topic? Sean knows about RPA. I mean, it's wonderful being able to present in a hybrid event. I think I was last time on a stage like more than a year ago. It seems it's always when you can point people out in the audience, it's so much easier to get an interaction going. AppWorks might be something of the first generation RPA. Like I mentioned, a lot of times these RPA solutions that are out there right now, some of them that I mentioned in the presentation, UiPath and Automation Anywhere and Blue Prism, they are really originated from early 2000s, so even pre-2005. So a lot of fairly legacy-ish technology out there. I guess I'm up on my time, so thank you everyone for listening in. It's great being here and presenting to you all.